Okay, folks, we'd like to get started, please. If anybody doesn't have a seat, there's some chairs over here. This aisle. Okay, first of all, I know several of you, more than several of you in this room, but those of you who do not know who I am, I'm Rodney Collins, the town manager, and I want to thank you for being here. I know that there's some concerns, some questions, some frustrations. What this forum is really all about tonight is to try to work together cohesively in order to provide some long-term answers. And we're going to obviously be argumentative. We control piping plovers. We cannot control mechanical pavers. We cannot control the weather, and we cannot control a lot of other things. But what we are focusing on is the scheduling of the dredging. If you're wondering why we go to the county, it's because if we went to an alternative, it's going to be 5 or 6 times the cost. But we also understand that we have to have a long-term solution so that we're not dealing with this again. So before I really get started into today's or tonight's agenda, a couple of folks that I do want to acknowledge in the audience is my assistant town manager, Wayne Taylor, in the back, and the longtime person who's been involved in dredging, who's been an unbelievable, dedicated and devoted volunteer to this town for a number of years, is Ken Bates. And Ken, can you please stand? And I would like to go right to the table and have everybody introduce themselves and their respective titles.
Good evening. I'm Ashley Fisher. I'm the Director of Natural Resources for the town of Mashpee.
My name is Mark Forrest. I'm chairman of the County Board of Commissioners. We oversee the dredging program.
My name is Robert Smino. I'm the harbor master for the town of Mashpee.
I'm Ken Cirillo. I'm the director of the Dredge program, and sitting right across from me is Jason Bettis, who's the superintendent of our program.
And Michaela Wyman, the delegates. Probably the court. They're not going to hit me with everything else. It could be 10
In
years.
terms of what is the purpose
I think that's
tonight, I'm going to be perfectly blunt. It's to provide you with some answers. As you can see on the agenda, at the end, there is a question and answer session. But before we get into that, there are some people who are going to give you some perspective of how we got to the point that we're at. All that I ask is that you keep it civil, keep it respectful. I understand that there's frustration. I do. And I also realize there are a lot of you who are paying big taxes and you are looking to be able to take your boat out without difficulty. Trust me when I say we're collectively working here together to provide a long-term solution. So without further ado, I am going to call up Mr. Forrest. Mark and I have been friends and colleagues, and I've worked very well with him, and I really appreciate him being here. He reached out to me and I said, you might be walking into a hot fireplace here tonight, but he said, I'm there. So at the very least, give him a nice round of applause for being here.
Including a speeding car that goes airborne when it hits a tow truck. A beauty queen's crown stolen just moments after she wears it for the first time.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Great, thank you. A little bit of background, and I'll be very, very brief. I've been chairman of the Board of Commissioners for the past year, and the dredging department and the dredging program is perhaps the most important program, or one of the most important programs that Barnstable County offers. We've been in the dredging business for 20 some odd, 30 some odd years. But I can tell you this, before the county got into the dredging business on behalf of the towns were pretty much left on their own and had to fight for funding from the state. In order for a town project to get dredged, you'd lobby your legislator. The legislator would go to the legislature, fight for an earmark. With any luck, you'd get an earmark in the budget. You'd get the money, but then there was a state bureaucracy that you had to go through to make sure that the money ultimately found its way to a dredge company that would in turn do the dredging. And back in those days, and I'm talking about the 70s and the 80s, I may look young, but I'm pretty old. I've been doing dredging for the town of Provincetown. I was town manager in Provincetown, and my job was to redevelop McMillan Pier and do a dredging basin for the fishing fleet. Back then, it was 80 boats. Dredging is important for not just recreational boaters, but it's important just in terms of the way of life. And when I worked in Provincetown, I left after 5 years and became the district director for Congressman Studs. And then I came to join the staff of Congressman Bill Delahunt. So I've been doing dredging work for about 40 years. And what I can tell you is that it's become increasingly challenging for not just Mashpee, but it's becoming challenging for almost all communities. And there are a variety of reasons for it. I'm not going to bore you to death. The good thing is that you've got Rodney as your town manager. You've got an outstanding board of selectmen, and you've got a harbor master who's focused on this like a laser beam, as well as our county dredge director, Ken Cirillo, who I have complete confidence in, and we're going to figure out a way to get this done. All right. No one's given up on this year. I've seen all the written materials and the emails and stuff. We're going to be doing our damnedest to figure out a way to get this area taken care of. All right. Now, in my 40 years of doing this, the thing that I can tell you is that what's become a bit more, I mean, there were times where projects were relatively simple, but there are very few simple projects anymore. The biggest challenge we're facing this year is permits, the permits. And each town has a narrower and narrower window of opportunity to actually get the work done. Now, what are the critters that we always have to navigate around? It's either the winter flounder, they have certain breeding seasons, they have certain periods of time where you can't disturb their habitat. We're spending an enormous amount of time and energy getting studies done to figure out if there's a way, to shorten their breeding period, but I don't think we can pull that off yet. But we are trying to find a way if we can have more precision on their breeding periods. We're trying to find better ways to work around the bird schedules. But the reality is those are problematic. Mashpee this year is not the only project that has a problem. We have had other communities run into those problems. I am a selectman in Yarmouth, and our boaters have been screaming. Our people that use our resources there have been screaming as well. Last year, people were very upset because we had delays getting into Yarmouth. It seems that this year has been the most challenging year for us in terms of permitting. We've been spending time, I've been organizing meetings, working with our congressional staff to get more meetings and discussions with the Army Corps of Engineers, with all the state agencies, because there's a whole alphabet soup of regulatory agencies that play a role in telling your town when you can put a dredge out there and when you can't. Now, it's the town. These are sort of multi-agency endeavors, right? We have the dredge, but we rely on the town of Mashpee to just sort of specify the dimensions of the project and then go through the permitting process on their own, or usually with consultants, to get the work done. But I can tell you this, it's no longer easy just in terms of submitting the paperwork and providing some basic information on what you want to do, and where the agencies, the regulatory agencies, are asking for more and more data, more and more information. They're putting more demands on the town to be more specific and more precise in terms of what's happening with the birds or what's happening with the flounder. So those challenges are getting greater. And like I said, Mashpee has been affected. We've had Yarmouth affected. We have had other towns affected. The other thing you need to keep in mind is that the dredging business itself is subject to wear and tear on equipment. And we are augmenting our reserves, we're augmenting our resources so that we'll have the ability to access equipment when it's needed. So rather than be stuck waiting to go to the assembly for funding, we're in a position where we've got more resources. We've set aside a lot more money this year to provide backup equipment for the dredge. And then the other challenge we're facing with this was staff. So we're not the only ones that have staffing issues, as we all know. Staffing issues are a problem across the board, almost every layer of government. Like I said, we're determined to get this done. In my years working for Congressman Studs and Congressman Delahunt, my job was to help get projects through the permitting process. And we generally had a pretty good record of success. I've pledged to the town manager that I'll do everything I can in terms of making sure that we have all our elected officials engaged, anybody and everyone who can help us move this project forward. So we're totally committed. I'm happy when we get to the point after Ken's done with his presentation. I honestly think that the presentation will be helpful in providing information to you in terms of where we go, where we dredge, how we're set up. But I am confident with the aggressive energy and effort that's going on right now, we will make some progress. I wish I could tell you when we'll have a dredge out there or when we can do that, but I know that every effort is being made to make this happen. I've told Ken that he has the full support of the county commissioners in terms of whatever he needs from the county end, if that means finding ways to bring in more personnel and more resources to support our county program. Come on in, folks. You don't want to come in? You're certainly happy and welcome to come. Okay. So I just want you to know that at the political level, this is clearly on our agenda, on our radar screen, and we're going to help in every way we can. So thank you. Thank you, Rodney.
Got it.
I would say next.
Mhm.
Okay. Can you hear me all? Loud enough? Good. So I'm Ken again, and I've been running this program for almost 3 years. My background is in marine navigation, managing companies. I managed the CMAP companies here in Mashpee for 20+ years. CMAP USA, which innovated all the navigation systems that everybody uses. We had an aviation division and a deep sea division. So my background is marine. And before that, I was in the NOAA Corps. I was a commissioned officer, and I sailed on board ships in Alaska and the East Coast here, and did a lot of other scientific work with them. So it's not my first time around, the water. Managing companies, managing projects has sort of been multitasking with things that I've always been doing. So I want to kind of go quickly through a bunch of slides to kind of cover the background of our dredging department. So first slide, please. So our department, it's very small. As you can see, it's a total of 8, with myself excluded. Jason is the superintendent, he's here. We have 2 open positions. So then those positions have been open now for almost 9 months to 12 months for each of those 2. So that's 25% reduction. So unfortunately, it's been a challenge like every place where everybody's looking for, good help. We do require at least some kind of experience because we are running, heavy duty equipment and small boat work. And I'm not making excuses. I just want to kind of lay everything out so everybody can see the lay of the land. The leverman position, those are the guys that actually manage the dredge. It is a very highly technical skill. We have people who bought our old house for quite a few years now. And then we have some deckhands that manage the skiffs. Next. And we are the regional program, regional department of dredging for the Cape. We don't just work in one town, 2 towns. Every single town uses our services except for Brewster, simply because they don't have any navigable channels. So we do projects all over the Cape. As Mark said, we've been now, this is the 28th year of operation. So there's a lot of history and a lot of dredging that's taken place. Next. So a couple of things, a couple of slides about our fleet. We have 2 dredges. This is the larger of the 2. It's called the Sand Shifter. They're both made from Ellicott Dredging, a company in Baltimore, Maryland. This one was purchased in 2019, commissioned in 2018, purchased in 2018, then commissioned in 2019, a year later. It's the larger of the 2. As you can see, the biggest difference between these 2 will be the distance they can pump. So that means that if they are out on station dredging in the channel, you know, they have a limit of how much material and how far they can do. It does vary according to how heavy the material is, if it's heavy duty sand or light sand or a combination. But the Sand Shift, we like to think it's about 5,000 feet. And that's, again, dependent on the location and the material itself. The next slide is the Codfish 2. This is our newer of the 2. It's the smaller of the 2. It is designed in the same way. These are hydraulic dredges, by the way. So there's a big difference between hydraulic dredging and mechanical dredging. We only do the hydraulic dredging. There's a very large cutter head on the front that spins, and it's connected to a Caterpillar engine, a big pump, and that's what sucks the material out as this spins on the bottom. So we are actually producing a slurry of sand and water that gets brought up through the dredge. Pipe. This was a smaller one, like I mentioned, it's about 3,500 feet is the capacity or the maximum distance. And both of those distances are without a booster. The next slide. So we have this thing called a booster station. Again, it's a big pump, just like that's on the dredge with a big Caterpillar engine. And now this gives us the capacity to go further distances. The longest distance that we have now done has been 2.2 miles. So that's a really long stretch from where the dredge is located to where the booster station sits, either on the beach or on a barge, and then all the way down the beach. Both Chatham and the Dead Neck here in Barnstable and Katuitt, those were our 2 longest projects that we've done for the towns. It's been rebuilt. It's a very big piece of equipment. It weighs about 30,000 pounds. It sits on top of the barge, or we drag it down the beach, depending on where we're working. Next. And then the fleet, we have a bunch of small skiffs. We have 2 big push boats. One's brand new. The other one is very old. And then next, we also are missing a 35-foot Duffy that we have on here that's been refurbished this past season. So this is our 3rd dredge support boat. Next. Shoreside equipment, you know, quickly here, we have one of these and one of those, and they're both dying. They're dead, and they are on their last leg, an excavator and a front end loader. But the good news is that we have gotten 2 grants for $1 million each. So we have $2 million. And I've never thought it would be so difficult to spend $1 million by June 30th. It hasn't been a fun experience, and it's been just a lot of work. But we have a long list of new equipment that we are going to be putting new loader, new skid steer, new excavator, new barge, another new push fusion machine. The list goes on and on and on. So we're very fortunate. Again, one of those is from the Mass Dredge, and the other one is from the opera funding. So 1 state, 1 federal. So this will be really good. By the time we're done with this, probably I'd say 18 months out, you know, we'll be very well stocked with brand new equipment. Next. We are sort of governed by a dredge advisory committee, 1 representative from each town. As Mark mentioned earlier, with Ken Bates, who's been on the committee since the inception, and then he'll be taken over by Robert here. But every town has a representative, and we meet quarterly, and you know, this is sort of our advisory committee. It's complicated, you know, as Mark mentioned, it's really not just showing up and do the work. It's a real juggernaut of a lot of pieces that need to be put together. And it's a lot of time. The smallest projects take a lot of time, and large projects take a lot more time. You know, moving pipe, floating pipe, putting pipe together, bringing the booster on station, fueling the dredge, on and on and on. It's just not a simple, pull up to the channel and start dredging. Next. The season, the season is the challenge. We really don't have a 365-day season. We like to think that we can start mid-September. 2 years ago, we did, but this year was very bad because there were no towns that had permits ready, which is one of the challenges that we had where we started very late, where we started in December, and Yarmouth had the permit that had been, their 10-year permit had been pending, and they had to get an emergency permit, and they finally got it. And we finally started the Yarmouth project in December, and there were no other projects. So this became really the beginning of where we ran into where we're at now. But the towns each town has to do the permitting, and that was Yarmouth. That's not Mashpee. Yarmouth, the town of Yarmouth. Yeah. But the projects are all done by the individual towns, and at that point, for our schedule, there were no towns that had permits ready to go. Next. Oh, so the dredge season, just let me finish up here for a second. So we have all of these time of year restrictions. They start as early as January 15th. So on the north side, January 15th, and a few places on the south side, winter flounder. You have to stop dredging, or waivers have to be asked for. Usually they're given, but they're very restrictive in how many days they'll allow us to go into that incursion. And then January 31st is the next one. So we have back-to-back winter flounder cutoff. And, some towns want to try to have their work done as late as possible, and others, have no choice because it's January 31st. And you'll see in a minute with Sassuit, we ended up being a month late again because of the weather and getting stuck trying to finish that project. Yes.
Do you feel that it would be appropriate to start in December? My understanding is the window was like December to February. To my knowledge, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, permitting has not been the issue in Mashpee. It's been the kitchen failures, the pipe and clover.
Yep.
And it seems like we're always trying to get geared up for mid-January towards February. Can you correct me if I'm wrong?
Correct.
Should we be doing this in December so we don't run into any of these issues?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. The challenge there is that, how much material is going to move to fill in the channel by the time the season starts. But, 2 years ago, we did the 1916 channel, the inner channel, then the Poppy channel, boom, 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 one after the next. So it does make sense to go earlier. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, and I'll show you where we ended up, but you're right. I mean, in that scenario, we could have said if we knew, but we didn't know at the time because we were already into doing other projects. And from the north side, Falmouth to Sassuit, and then Lydia's Cove, followed by Stage Harbor, and then that's where we got kind of stuck. So yes. Sorry, say that again.
Showed a little while ago, well, the little dots where you are dredging.
Yes, okay.
And your equipment, everything that right now we're seeing and who can bring up, like, if there's any more dredging that you need to do, are you okay with that?
Hey, the answer to that is it depends. If we start early enough and we don't have the difficult challenges we had this year with the weather, it was a very mild winter, but it blew more this year than past years. We lost about half the days because of weather this year. Seas, high seas, extremely low tides that kept us from mobilizing. So it's unfortunately not a matter of throw more equipment at it or throw more money at it. There's staffing challenges, obviously, that we have that we need to fix. We know that. But those projects that we have and the schedule that we have laid out works if we start early and we don't have the challenges. But every year we have to, evaluate the priorities that, each town has and whether it's an annual project or a project that's every other year.
Dredging, Mashpee.
So it's 15.6.
The issue that you've been wrestling with lately has been birds, which in some respects is a permitting issue. Yes. Yes, right. If you attempt to put, because the piping plover is a protected species, any of the activity involving beach nourishment is considered a form of harassment of the bird. And so because the endangered species is protected by federal law and state law, the regulatory agencies become incredibly protective about anything that you could do that might be considered harassing or disturbing the birds. That's exactly it. Now, I want to comment on the town manager, Rodney Collins, actually made an incredibly important point, is that sometimes you can have a window of opportunity. I learned this from the Army Corps of Engineers and getting them to dredge. We have a number of federally authorized channels on Cape Cod, and it's always been difficult to get the Army Corps of Engineers to dredge. One of the reasons why they have been slow in dredging is they don't want to come back after the winter months and do a project again. So oftentimes you'll have a permitting window of opportunity, let's say in December or January. But in some cases, there are some ports, there are some harbors. I'm not suggesting Mashpee has this problem, but there are many that do with more frequency. And that is there'll be winter storms that create shoaling in the harbor. So there's an element of guesswork to this. You want to make sure that when you have a window of opportunity, the likelihood of storms, of other inclement weather, the likelihood is minimal in terms of it following you. Because in some cases, if you'll see the way this equipment is staged, there's some sequencing. It's difficult sometimes to go from one end of the Cape to the other because it eats up a lot of time and it can be a real challenge. So the idea is to be doing ports and harbors in close proximity to one another. You want to work one section of the Cape, in a season or during a certain time period. So the timing of this is complicated because of weather and because of the permitting. And quite frankly, there's an element of guesswork in it as well. I mean, it's just, that's the reality of it. You can guess wrong. You can go into an area early and then find out that a winter storm in January or February has really messed up your harbor and all the work that you did pretty much is gone. We've seen that happen in some harbors and ports as well. So it's not a perfect science. There's an element of guesswork in it as well.
And let me just add for clarity that our paperwork is in order, it's valid, our permitting is valid, but it's a condition, that's what I call it. The condition of the pipe and plover will put certain restrictions on us that we can't control, but that's generally after March, and that's why I was asking a question about starting in December, even though historically we've gone in mid-January to February, so we eliminate what we're dealing with now. Thank you.
So let me move on. Maybe we can kind of circle back for other questions. Next slide.
Right, I'm responding to which
You have to ask
trying to
questions, sorry.
later at the end.
So the next slide shows the work that's been done since 2015 in Popponesset Bay, the approach channel, the inner channel, and the 1916 channel. So the blip that occurred in 2020 was with COVID. They stopped, then they restarted into May. And that was sort of where all of a sudden the volume dropped. The next year we did the infamous 9999 cubic yards. And then the following year we did the 4860 last year, 4860. And then this year the target was about 4,700. I'll show you that in a minute. So there's been a lot of projects here, obviously, and goes way back prior to 2015 as well. Next slide. Our schedule, you know, we have had quite a few projects, even though we did start late. You know, the Yarmouth project, I won't go through each of these, but as you can see, the Falmouth one, and we do have this sort of sequence of a plan where the dredge needs to move to the north side. So, you know, we'll bring it and move it along and go from Falmouth and Bourne if there's a project, then Sassuit. We also didn't do Truro this year, and that was because we got stuck in Sassuit. When I mean stuck, we had weather in there that, you know, probably 180 degrees of the compass, whether it's due west or due east, any direction, we can't dredge. The swell comes in, the dredge can't work because the cutter head keeps on going off the bottom. We've got a lot of pipe to manage. So that project, you know, did suffer as well because it took us about 4 weeks longer than it should have. It was a relatively small project, as you can see. We didn't do Truro. We couldn't get down there. It's a long stretch to move to Truro because we had to get back to Mashpee. And then we had the problem with the canal where they were doing work on the railroad bridge, and the bridge was closed every single day. It opened at 4 o'clock. That time of year, it was dark. We couldn't make the transit. We finally got them to open up for us late in the day, and the dredge arrived, I think it was the 24th of March. And then we'll get to the next part of that story in a second. But as you can see, we did other projects in Chatham, Lydia's Cove, Stage Harbor. We didn't do Round Cove. They didn't have a permit in hand. Unfortunately, a very big, important project with a tight little channel that's shoal, very, very shoal, but it's not going to get done because their permit is still stuck. Mill Creek, we just finished that project. That was supposed to have started in the fall. We're doing 2 projects right now in in Harwich. We're doing Allen Harbor right now, and we're actually starting Saquatucket tomorrow to try to get both those projects done so we can move the dredge here. That's standby. And then we have 2 in Falmouth that are also pending their permit for Green Pond and Great Pond. The entrance is there. Green Pond, Green Pond has got some pretty significant shoaling, but their permit has been closed for the last 6 weeks or so. So that's kind of where we'll leave off in a couple of weeks, you know, somewhere at the beginning of end of the month, beginning of July. Next. This is the project. This is the plan. I won't go through it, but it talks about, you know, the authorized depth is 5 feet. The permitting agency, the permit gives us 1 foot extra. It's called an over dredge. And that allows us to, you know, we're not going to be accurate. We can't do 5 feet exactly. So at 5 feet, there's supposed to be at mean low water, there's supposed to be 5 feet of clearance. That's what that translates to. The extra dredge companies to give them a little extra, because again, you can't get that 5 foot exact. And the next slide I'll just kind of go to because I think the next slide tells a little bit better. So that area, that arrow in red is really the area from the survey that we do before the project is done that has the most material. So we have a consultant who does the surveys for us, a pre-dredge survey and a post-dredge survey. The pre-dredge shows the condition of the channel, and it identifies the areas that need to be dredged. And then after we're done, there's a post-dredge survey that shows what we've done that's used for the invoicing purposes and for the record for the town. So here, which is quite interesting because if you remember last year, we did about 5,000 and change. This year, it's about 4,700, 26 cubic yards of what our target was going to be in that red line where the biggest shoaling occurred. Up to the north at the head of the channel, it's kind of gravelly. We really have never dredged there. It's very difficult for us to dredge there because of the material. And then the south side, all the way to the end of the channel, you know, has much less. And if time permitted, we would go down there and clean it up. Now, south of the designated channel, there's obviously another section that is not part of the channel that we are not going to dredge, but that's shoal back there as well. But we are not dredging past the designated channel. Next. And this just shows the profile. So if you were looking down on a cut version of it, you know, the bottom one shows that end of the channel where there's not much material. The one in the middle shows a little bit more, which is off to the left side, the right side. The green sounding, so the green color shows that that depth is not needing to be dredged. So it's at that 5 foot level. And then anything that is brown, red is below that. So up to the north there, that top, the middle one and the top one that shows that cross section, what it looks like. Next. So the original plan that we had was to run the pipe, and actually the original plan was to put the pipe on the beach and ship it all the way down the beach. When we kind of got knocking on April 1st door, the pipe has to be off the beach. There's no exceptions because of the plovers. Audubon has been fabulously flexible with us this year. I would tell you that we've never seen the flexibility that they've offered for us in Chatham and here in Mashpee on being able to try to find solutions. What we ended up coming up with as a plan was to put the pipe in perpendicular to the beach instead of running it all the way down the beach, because it has to be off the beach. So bring it in perpendicular so it comes straight in. Now that presents a big challenge for us because as we saw in Chatham, we did some damage to the pipe because it was left there sitting on a pontoon. Some, big swells and big, wave activity can come in and do some damage. But they like the idea, and it proved that now it helps us out because we can not push it, but we can go beyond that April 1st rather than say you're done and you're going to get out of here. So this was our plan. And we were still within the nominal distance of using the codfish, the smaller dredge, because the bigger dredge was down in Chatham on the Stage Harbor project. Next slide. So this is sort of like a wrap of, again, not excuses. So not to show why we didn't do it, but the reality of the situation. We had a very late start. We lost half of our dredging days from the start of the season till April. And our shortage of staff. We really did get stuck where we were not able to have a second dredge to move to Mashpee to work because we were short on the staff. Next. I'm almost done. Here's the option slide. So the options, what do we have? What options do we have? Do nothing and wait until the fall or the early winter and put it in the schedule and do it as a top priority. We also looked at trying to do it in September, but there was still August 1st actually, but there were challenges with the plovers still not fledging. They're still there, and that was a no. September 1 was possible, but obviously that's a little bit too late. And then the next option that we are now working on with the town on requesting a waiver to allow us to do the work as soon as possible. Larger dredge, the sand shifter with the booster on a barge on the south side in the exposed seas and putting the material down all the way down to the west and waiting place. So that's the current plan. And we're waiting for, I guess I'll leave it up to others, John and Bobby, to talk about that and where they're at, because it just got submitted yesterday. But we are prepared to be like the Pied Piper and bring 7,000 plus feet of pipe from Harwich down here with 3 boats and get the help that we need and tow it all here and get ourselves staged as quick as we can. We have to finish the Harwich projects first. We have one that'll take a handful more days, and the other one we'll be just starting tomorrow, so it won't be for a couple of weeks, in honesty. But that is the current plan right now. Why does Harwich take precedent over Mashpee is the question. I have to repeat it for online. So,
100 people on it.
well, it's when we ran into when we were in Chatham and we were finishing the project in Chatham, the Stage Harbor project, we were ready to come here with the sand shifter to try to get in 4 or 5 days. They gave us that window. And then the problem we had was that the plovers moved further west, and the Audubon said, you have to now go 200 meters from that nesting location, which was just south of the island, the Popponesset Island. And that now put the distance too far away for the sand shifter. And we simply don't have enough time on doing what we're going to do, which is putting the booster on the barge and bringing the barge down here. So we ran out of time. The plovers ended up, moving to the west and occupying that one area. And again, we had a lot of flexibility, but the distance became just too much at the end. We were now into what, Jason, the end of April. Yeah, so we were 4 weeks now past that magical April 1st deadline. Yeah. Yes. I'm going to divert this question to one of you guys.
So it's that corner of the property. No birds in that area.
Yeah, and you know, when you looked at the other slide that showed those other locations that said Popponesset spit, you know, it depends on the material, how much pipe we have. You know, we'll put it halfway down, 3/4 of the way down, the preferred location. And then, you know, if we have the skid steer that we'll use to move it down the beach. So it's always tried to be, you know, what we call rough grading. Yeah. So the question is what needs to be done to get option 2 to work? What
I'll
they-
step in. Hi, everyone. My name's Bobby Tomeno. I'm the harbor master for the town of Mashpee. My name's on this agenda a lot tonight. I promise I won't bore you with a lot of the details, but I'll try to answer all of your questions. Ken Cirillo just made my job very easy for the night by providing you with that great slideshow. Actually, you guys should bring that back up.
10 more slides.
So the question I'm answering for the gentleman in the back, we found out, Ken and I talked last night, and we kind of came up with, and John Malloy as well, came up with a plan to see if we can get this done by, you know, with the summer boating season still in effect. Ken and I talked briefly. We're looking at a possible time frame to get the dredge up here. Ken, I don't want to speak out of turn, but possibly June 25th. Maybe, possibly. Again, everything's weather dependent, and you know, mechanical stuff happens. We submitted a request today through our consultant with the Army Corps of Engineers in the state, as well as National Heritage, to see if this could be possible with the birds that are out there now. Dumping it on Waiting Place Road is far enough away from what I have been told from the birds that this could be possible with a plover monitor. So we'll see what happens, and we're waiting on those answers from the Army Corps of Engineers and National Heritage. So I'm optimistic from what I've been told by our consultant. This plan could work. But again, it's waiting on hearing back from the Army Corps of Engineers, National Heritage, and the Plover people. Good. I don't know, man. I'm not a plover expert, unfortunately. 7 pairs of plovers. There you go. Go ahead, Tim.
During the earlier slide, I guess I've asked the committee up here, the group speaking, our neighboring town, Great Pond and Green Pond here, they weren't ready. Did we get negatively affected by that because you didn't want to bring equipment this far down without being able to get found?
No, I mean, absolutely not. No,
Ken, can you just repeat the question for
the question is was Mashpee negatively affected because Falmouth did not have their permits in hand and we did not want to move our equipment here? So no, the answer is that, you know, there's no preferential treatment given to one town or the other. I mean, it might appear to be that way, and I know perception becomes reality. But, you know, if you look at our historical record this year, last year, the year before, we did projects that are 235 cubic yards. We just did the Falmouth Inner Channel in January, it was 700 cubic yards. Took us 5 days to set up and break down, and a half day and a quarter of dredging. So that there's not really a priority as though this town is more important than that. Let's camp out here. You know, as we make our way around Cape and go from town to town, you know, just logistics sometimes take over. But in the case of, you know, where we ended up, we really just got, you know, stuck and we were not able to, you know, get here in time. I'm sure. Yeah, I certainly feel the same way. But being on the side that I wouldn't say making decisions, but you know, we got dealt a tough hand this year. And unfortunately, as we've seen in other years, not every project gets done. Not every project on a schedule gets done. Bass River in Yarmouth, we unfortunately didn't finish that project 3 years ago, I think it was. And it's very overdue, especially now. So, is there a guarantee? Unfortunately, there isn't. We do our best to try to make it happen. We do our best to try to put the priorities in place. The project is supposed to be done annually. We do what we can to make sure that it's done annually because there's a reason for it. We obviously think that, guys work really hard. And it's not a function of not wanting to, it's just a function of sometimes scheduling doesn't work.
I see the microphone. I want to just add. I just want to add to Ken's comments. We are highly incentivized to do as many projects as we can. It's important for you to understand that. We don't like delays any more than anything else does, because what happens is in order for the county budget for the dredge program to work, we balance the budget using the fees that we get from actually doing the dredging work. So the more fees we get, the more we're able to support the operations of the dredge. So if there's a delay, we're incentivized to work with the town to figure out how we can overcome delays. And as you can see, $2 million in funding to help with reserves for equipment is an indication that we're getting support at the state and federal level to keep our equipment fresh, to keep it up to speed. Now, the other thing that also just want to throw into the mix is our frustration level on the permitting actually hit a peak back. When I say us, I mean the county commissioners. We got really worked up about this back in the winter. And so we called upon our congressional delegation to set up a summit meeting with the Army Corps of Engineers and with the state agencies so that we could find ways to in our estimation, we saw permitting issues becoming too problematic, and we're concerned about the future. So we are now in the process of having regular summit-style meetings in which professional staff, county, the chairman of the Board of County Commissioners, along with our dredge team in the permitting agencies.
Did you eat all those nuggets? Did you eat all those nuggets? Yeah, how many you ate?
We're involved in dredging.
6.
Like I said, Mashpee is clearly on the list.
You
and it
ate
will
6
be a
nuggets?
subject of ongoing discussion in the future. We hear you. I mean, we're here to listen. Anything that we can.
Well, folks, with all due respect, we've got to continue with the agenda, and then I want to get into questions and answers.
You're gonna start
I know he's got some critical info for you. I just want to get through that. We are going to take questions and answers. Didn't want to stop some of them because they are important, but I just want to keep this on program here. Can you continue, please?
So like I said, Ken really covered a lot of what I was going to talk about as far as logistics for the dredge for this year. Just to touch on one thing, I did submit a request, it's called an incursion request to National Heritage back on Wednesday, March 15th. That incursion was in regards to the piping plovers. Once Ken and I had talked, that was in regards to the pipe on the beach, moving the pipe perpendicular and allowing us more time to get this project done. So from the town side of things and also from the county side of things, we have submitted requests to the federal government, or to National Heritage and to the Army Corps of Engineers to further get this project done at a later date. As far as the 2022-2023 dredge plan goes, I'm all set with what Ken had provided to all of you in regards to that. As far as moving forward, I briefly touched on the possibility of getting this done in June. Like I said, all the paperwork was submitted yesterday for that. Ken and I have talked logistically as far as getting this done. Am I optimistic it's going to get done? It all lies on, right now, it all lies on the Army Corps of Engineers, National Heritage, to get back to us and say, this is good to go or it's not good to go. As far as our consultants can say, it looks pretty decent right now. Once we have a concrete answer for all of you, I'll disseminate it to everybody, just like I did with the public information notice, and you'll all be kept in the loop as well as we can keep you. Moving on, we have looked at some alternatives for dredging outside of the county. And touching on that briefly, the town we touched on it before, it's extremely expensive. And just because you find an alternative to dredge other than the county, doesn't mean you can just dredge whenever you want to dredge. You're still subject to these toy restrictions, time of year restrictions, that the same thing the county is inclined to. So just because we find an alternative solution to the dredging, doesn't mean I can pull the dredge out there, June 1st and say, okay, dredge it. It doesn't work that way. And Ken will back me up on that 110%. The county and the way we've been doing it for this long is a great option. Pumping the sand back onto the beach, and John will talk about it more later. It also protects the spit. So taking that sand out of the approach channel and dumping it somewhere else, it's not going to help the spit per se. Will it make the channel more navigable? Sure, right now, but at the end of the day, we want to get that sand back onto the beach. Again, as far as permitting goes, I can't emphasize enough that all of our permits were in place for this project to happen. Everything was in place. The incursion requests were submitted. Everything was done on our end to have this completed. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here on the agenda just to kind of wrap it all into one. There's something called a 10-year comprehensive permit for the town of Mashpee. That expires in, I believe, and Ken, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it's 2026. The Army Corps permit expires in 2026. We have already started to renew that 10-year comprehensive permit so that we don't run into problems like Harwich has run into, like not Falmouth, but Harwich, Truro, other towns down the Cape that are taking 5 years, to get this permit back from the Army Corps of Engineers. So we have already started this process with the hopes of it doesn't take 5 years for the permits to return to us. John, do you want to, I don't know if the town manager wants to speak on regards to funding for alternative dredging. That's up to you, sir. But if
Into that at the end, just before.
okay, perfect. John, do you want to jump ahead a little bit into what we have with Save the Bay? Do you want to pull up John's?
John Malloy, today. I've been actively involved in STEC probably the last 7, 8 years or so. I got on the board of State Office today. I know there's been a lot of questions that are about what State Office today does, what's our role. To be clear, we are not responsible for dredging the approach channel. We've talked a lot about who is, how that works. We are probably the biggest champion that's trying to support everybody. We're a huge cheerleader. The sand goes on the spit, it goes on our property. So we are beneficiaries of all of the dredging. Sand is what helps you rebuild the spit. I know if you take a look at the slide that's up now, this just shows you what the system looks like. Well, Save Popponesset Bay is a 501c3 nonprofit. Our job is to protect the spit, it's to rebuild the spit, it's to work with the town, maintain the channels as best we can, it's to work with Mass Audubon as their partner, to make sure the last third of the spit works for Mass Audubon. The entire spit is subject to endangered species regulations. So that impacts everything the county dredge does, it impacts everything State Popponesset Bay does. We have protected species, there are endangered species that visit the spit. So it does put a lot of paperwork, a lot of constraints on what we do. But when you look at this chart, the town is responsible for the Popponesset approach channel, also known as the outer channel. They're responsible for the inner channel. They're responsible for the 1916 channel. One of the things Save Popponesset Bay did years ago was took responsibility for the Popponesset Island channel. And that is obviously what connects the bay to Popponesset Creek. That is the only way out of the creek. So Save Popponesset Bay does own those permits like this. with this whole group a couple weeks ago to actually do some more testing where we took sonar and we're looking at whether that channel can actually extend it further to the west, the corner through there gets a bit skinny. So we're working on that to see, they actually finished the work last week and now we're getting ready to see if we can actually amend that permit to extend that channel. But that is the kind of thing State Pump has to data. We have dredged that channel a couple of times. I know about 3 or 4 years ago, we had Pastori down there doing some considerable work on the channel. I asked them to go in and dredge that while they were there, and they did. So that channel has stayed pretty stable, all things considered. But that is the channel that we control. When we look at that channel and the spit, it's really a system because I think, as we all know, the beach is very narrow in front of the end of Popponesset Island. If that spit moves back any further, that channel is going to close. So we have been fighting the fight. We spent between $3 and $4 million rebuilding the spit, rebuilding those dunes, putting sand out there, putting grass out there. We spent almost $300,000 this winter just fortifying the dunes at the end of Popponesset, opposite the end of Popponesset Island, protect that channel. Unfortunately, for some strange reason, it's probably the large jetty that's out there. The part of the spit that degrades and erodes the fastest, the most, is actually right at the end of Popponesset Island. So we spent a lot of time and effort on that. One of the reasons why we're such big advocates and supporters of annual dredging is historically, when the county comes to bring their booster pump, they bring their 7,000, 5,000 yards of pipe, and they dump that sand in the corner on a jetty. They dump it for the next several hundred yards, really from the corner by the jetty to the end of Popponesset Island. And that's what's worked for us as State Popponesset Bay. That's what's protected that channel. So what happened last year was the county dredge came. They only had 3,500 yards. They couldn't put the sand where we wanted it. They put it halfway down the spit. So State Popponesset Bay lit their hair on fire because we weren't getting the sand where we needed it to protect that channel. So that's one of the issues we have with the county dredge program, making sure that that sand comes all the way to the beginning of the spit. The sand moves from the west end where the spit starts and basically migrates to the east end. A lot of it ends up back in the channel, and then we pay the county dredge to take it back out again and pump it back to the other end. The spit, the Army Corps of Engineers studied the spit a number of years ago. The spit loses about 10,000 yards a year due to erosion. That's assuming no big storms, hurricanes or something. But we lose about 10,000. So when we get 5,000 back from the county dredge, better than nothing. But we're clearly still losing some sand. We have had some big construction projects out there over the last number of years, the last half a dozen years. And one of the key, longer, wider, deeper is certainly our mantra. I'll touch on that. But we just finishing up, we work very closely with the county. We work very closely with the town. We do anything we can to support the annual dredging program. I actually met with Nassau Audubon just a couple hours ago, talking about trying to get the green light for this dredging in June. They said, great, looks good. So I think, hopefully all our fingers are crossed, but part of things coming together for that. Say Popponesset Bay will certainly do anything anybody asks us to help there. But about 6 years ago, we started looking at a long-term strategy for the spit and a long-term strategy for the channels. We said, all right, we kind of witness what happens every year. We understand what happens with the county dredge. We said, what is the right long-term plan? We had Hurricane Sandy, the spit was basically, a shoal at that point, had a lot of openings and what have you. So we hired Woods Hole Group and put together a comprehensive plan to rebuild the spit, rebuild basically everything we could to preserve the spit, preserve the channels, preserve the building, because the worst thing that can happen to the dredge is multiple breaches, because what that means ultimately is the all So years back, Army Corps basically said you need one really good efficient, make this big.
That's why it's so critical to keep the one we have working. That's done on an annual basis. So we worked with Woods Hole Group. We put a strategy together that said, all right, let's look at creating a longer, wider, deeper channel. Why longer, wider, deeper? If you look at the channel today, it's about 80 feet wide, very narrow. For safety, we thought it would be much better to make it wider, but it also provides some significant visual sand. So we looked at expanding the channel. another
John,
50
can
feet.
you just stand at this mic? They can't hear you on the Zoom call. Sorry, there's 90 people on it. I just want to make sure they all hear you.
I apologize. We do have about 90 people on Zoom, so I want to accommodate. Yeah.
There we go. Sorry about that. So as far as the longer, wider, deeper channel, we're looking, we started this comprehensive planning effort with Woods Hole Group. We came up with a design that incorporated kind of the lessons learned from a number of years before that, because we saw where the shoaling was. We went back and looked at the dredging records and said, where was the sand? Where did it show up? You know, what's the right strategy? Woods Hole had a great idea, which was to put a catch basin or 7 catchment on the west side to try and extend the life of the channel. And you can see that's the dark hatched area at the top. I think at the time only one had been done. I think it may have been Chatham. It was successful. We pushed the regulators. We said, hey, let's do it. I know we'll be number 2. They were supportive. They said, great. And apparently it's worked really well. First one has worked really well, and everybody's been very supportive of incorporating that into the design. We widened the channel another 50 feet. We looked at some of the shallow spots further out, and we extended the channel another 250 feet. So understanding how permitting worked, we thought we were embarking on about a 3-year effort. So this is year 6. Unfortunately, COVID definitely added a solid 3 years to that effort. But we applied for grants. We got money from Mass CZM. They funded a lot of the, actually a lot of the study work. We matched about 30% of that. So fortunately, the money that we've raised and spent, the state Popponesset Bay has gone into reconstructing the channel. State, as I said, has really helped us on the permitting. We're very, very, very close on the permits. The state has told us they're just about ready to issue the longer, wider, deeper permits, which would be fantastic. The Army Corps went out for final comments on our permit back in February. They're telling us that they're getting very, very close. Unfortunately, I think they're stacked up with all these other permits that other towns have, but they've told us that we're really, really close. So we're on the verge of having these longer, wider, deeper permits. And I think, you know, what we're seeing today is certainly, we think this is an excellent long-term solution to the problems we're seeing now. You know, we're going to make the channel 2 feet deeper, so it's going to be a lot more resilient. It's going to be able to actually have a lot more sand shifting through there and still, you know, provide for great boating for folks. I think the extra width is, you know, it's got just a lot of benefits, but I think that sediment catchment area is really going to help extend that first third, really hopefully mitigate a lot of the risk that, you know, future dredging efforts, you know, are delayed.
Just so everyone's clear too, the town and myself, we really support that project. And we've been working with John in conjunction with it, and we're all for it. So that's definitely a great long-term solution that we see from the harbor master side of things. It's a great endeavor. I'm going to let Ashley Fisher, the Director of Natural Resources, come up and speak briefly in regards to what we're doing on the harbor management plan side of things, and she'll give a brief overview of how that works.
Well, thank you everybody for coming. It's a great turnout. We do have, like I said, 90 participants here. Just to reiterate, this project is very unique. The catchment is that hashed section there. So the way that the sand is shifting down the beach, it will fill in the catchment prior to the channel, which is the overall goal of the longer, wider, deeper. So it is worth the effort, and we fully support you. And just getting into outside funding sources. The town recently received and was awarded a grant for the Seaport Economic Council. We've engaged with the consultants from the Urban Harbors Institute and Woods Hole Group. we were awarded $150,000 and the town is supporting and allocated $50,000 to pursue a state-approved harbor management plan. That means we'll have something that's hard and fast for future regulatory agencies or new employees of the town to move forward with all dredging projects. So we're outlining both bays. We're outlining both bays based on their needs, both Sequoia and Popponesset. We're looking at Aquay, we're looking at the Popponesset approach, we're looking at other areas that are in need of future dredging. What this will do is we'll open the doors for future funding through the Seaport Economic Council, through CZM, and other agencies that do give that funding for these particular projects, such as beach nourishment, climate change efforts due to sea level rise, and just overall health of our water body. So I do have the notice to proceed that has all of the information outlined and what we're pursuing through the state. If you wanted to take a copy home with you today, it's here. And for the people on Zoom, I can provide you a copy via email if you provide that in the chat. One other thing I did want to mention, we're going to be engaging the community on June 13th at the New Seabury Country Club from 4 to 6. So please come, voice your opinion. Our consultants will take note of it and it will be in our overall plan that we're going to move forward with. This plan is also bound for renewal every 10 years. So when it comes time, we're going to redo the plan based on the needs that are seen currently. There's also action items within this plan. So we have a harbor management committee that will carry out the actions that are identified in this plan moving forward. Of the Mashpee River? Well, that's a longer story that I don't know if we're going to get into today.
So real quick, just to kind of summarize everything here for everybody. There's a lot of moving parts to dredging. It's not like filling a pothole out on the road. You can't just go over to it and put some asphalt in and call it a day. There's a lot of moving parts for this. There's a lot of behind the scenes work that goes into it. And we have been working nonstop to try to get this done for all of you. Again, it all comes down to those toy restrictions, which Ken outlined before. The time of year restrictions are really what holds us up. Please know that Mashpee's permits are all in their respective order. There's no issue in regards to the permitting. I hope there's no confusion on that on anyone's end in this room. If there's any question to it, you're more than welcome to talk to me afterwards. But as far as we all know, Mashpee's permits are all in respect here. So there's no issues with that. The biggest thing that we dealt with this year was, as Ken Cirillo said, was the weather, the time of year restrictions, and the issues that Ken had run into that he already explained. I'm not gonna go back into that. But with all that said, I'm gonna let the town manager come up and speak about the funding for alternative methods and kind of update you on that in that regard.
Thank you. Obviously, when we heard that it wasn't going to be a dredging this year, I immediately decided that we've got to come up with possibly a short-term plan as well as a long-term plan. And the long-term plan would consist of making sure that we never have to revisit the challenges and the frustration and the aggravation that we experienced this year. And I know a lot of you have emailed me. I appreciate all of your comments. I do take them seriously, and I try to be your voice. I know I've done a lot of complaining and bitching to my good friend over here, and he's taken it on the chin. But in all seriousness, at the end of the day, we've got to try to work together to come up with solutions rather than just bitch and complain, because I don't want to just be the negative Nelly. So in terms of funding, it would potentially cost the town another 4 or 5 times what we're paying currently, possibly even more than that. The grand total is, I should know that off the top of my head, around. I was going to say 60 something, but You say it's 65?
65, I don't know if that includes the skids here.
It's, yeah, so it's 70,000 total current. It's $70,000 currently, and that covers the skid steer cost. With going outside, you're talking about 4 to 5 times the 70,000. You can answer that one.
So at this point, what we took a look at was whether or not the county, in good faith, is going to say this will not happen again. Now, I understand that there can't be a blanket promise. I get that. And I understand that you can't control the weather or mechanical failures. I said that at the beginning of this public forum. But obviously, in terms of scheduling and doing our due diligence to make sure that it doesn't happen again, that's what we owe you. And I heard from the county in telephone conversations that they will, in fact, do their level best to make sure that we're not in this situation again. The alternative, in terms of funding, it's a long process because we've got to prepare our budgets in the fall, generally by October 1st. They are not approved until the subsequent May, and they don't take effect until the subsequent July 1st. Our fiscal year, as I'm sure you all know, goes July 1st to June 30th. So that's a long process, and it would not help us with the short-term needs that we were confronted with. What we wanted to try to determine is whether or not we needed to look at these options as a long-term plan. We were taking a look at private dredging. I think, I don't want to get into specifics, but I know Robert, I believe, was one. We were looking at the town of Beckertown. We were looking at some others. The cost and the length of the financial process is problematic in resolving anything for this summer. When I was talking to the commissioner, he assured me that they don't want to lose our revenue, as little as it may be, but at the or fee system. But I don't want to lose the county cost either, if we can help it. But I also don't want to be here a year from now revisiting this. So that's a little perspective on the financial challenges. And with that having been said, I told you that at the end, I would give you an opportunity to ask some questions, and that time has arrived. Yes, sir. No. For, if we go through the county, yes. If we go through a private company, no. But the plan here was the county, and I think they want us to stay with them. And I think Commissioner Forrest knows that we want to stay with them. Well.
We got to put it to it, be better. So here you are, supposed to do the right thing. Is anything being done in collaboration?
The question is whether or not we're collaborating with Katuitt because they benefit. Who wants to?
As far as working with Barnstable goes in this respect, I can't speak on what has happened in years past. I don't know if Ken can speak on the Barnstable aspect of all this, but I really can't as far as Barnstable. So.
Do the permitting required through the Conservation Commission March for the 19th. There was, before I got on the Waterways Commission, there was an intent for us to go and talk to them about doing sand nourishment on Patuit properties. And needless to say, my predecessors said that we're not going to do that. So we'll keep a low profile in making any operatory decisions, because the sand, the sediment that ends up in the spit, needless to say, is extremely important. Hope that answers the question that came up. Barnstable does have boaters that use the channel. Falmouth has boaters that use our channel. So it's important not only to Mashpee boaters, transient boaters, have transient facilities to be able to and, but anyway, that's keeping it as short as I can. I'm not going to be short.
Okay, question.
My question to the harbor master, in terms of the dredging needs to be done immediately, is it 100 yards of length that we're short right now, everything is filled in, or is it a longer length than that?
Well, I'm going to refer to the pre-dredge survey that was done back in February. We would like to get that 4,000 cubic yards out channel. That's our goal.
So we can either go with a hydraulic dredge, which we have to put about a mechanical dredge for just this year to be able to pass the sand off to the right and the left. I realize we want it on the spit, but we might not be able to get it on the spit. A mechanical dredge could probably do the thing in 4 or 5 days and be done.
I'm not a dredge expert. I'm going to let everybody know that right now. But give me 1 second real quick. I looked into all this logistically wise. It's not as easy as you think. You can't just dump the sand anywhere you want to dump it. You have to dump it in a pre-approved nourishment site. So it's not that easy, unfortunately. I wish it was. I really do. I wish you could just pick the sand up and go dump it somewhere else. It's not that simple. It's really not.
So it's got to be specified exactly where it's going.
Exactly. The sand needs to be, if we want to bring it somewhere else, you got to truck it. You got to truck that sand somewhere. I mean, let's say we were to go that route. You have to take the sand to the boat ramp. You got to take the sand out of Mashpee and put it somewhere that's pre-approved nourishment site. It's not that simple to do. It's really not. I wish it was.
Very much like just like south.
And let the sand go offshore. It just can't be done that way. That's all specified in our permits. It's all specified by the time of year restrictions. That was a great question. I appreciate you asking it because it does clarify, I think, for a lot of people in here. Yeah.
Before we continue, I noticed some in the back, and I just want to introduce the Waterways Commission Chair, Steve Monis, in the back here. Can you just raise your hand, Steve? Okay. Next question. Yes.
I understood you correctly, the channel cost of the company is 65.
About.
Channel cost.
So probably three times that per channel. Yes.
Approximately. Yes, sir. Okay,
I'm gonna go look at it. I want to know tomorrow morning, how much water is in that channel at any time of the tide cycle? I'm impressed with all the data that you actually have. I thought dredging was much less scientific than you guys are doing it. So you have all this information, you have these soundings. Why were we never told at high tide how much water you've got? Or at the low tide, how much water have we got? Right now, none of us with inboard can make a day trip. We can get out at high tide, but we don't know when we can come back. So I'm asking, it seems to me a simple situation. We should know what's the minimum amount of water in the worst part of that channel throughout the 24-hour or 12-hour tide cycle. I guess it's 12 hours, yeah. The 12-hour cycle. So I can figure out I've got 3 hours to get out and get back, or I got 2.5 or whatever. You understand my question, sir? Thank you.
So I completely get where you're coming from, and I don't disagree with you at all, one bit. What I'm not going to do is I'm not going to hold myself or the town down to a specific depth at low tide or at high tide, because I don't have the equipment to go out there and do a depth sounding or do a regular sounding out there. I can't just take a boat out there with a depth sounder on it and say, okay, you have 1.9 feet of water out there. Because I don't know if that depth sounder is 100% accurate. Depth sounders are a guide to boaters. They're not a complete and utter, chart. I don't have that for you right now. As far as getting a survey done, Ken, I don't know if we do this on June 25th, will we get another survey done before that dredge again? Do you recommend another survey? What do you think?
Yeah, I would think that, based on what we saw last time when we had a delay, there really wasn't much change that occurred from a 2-month period, which is kind of where we're at now. So I don't think there's a need for us to do another survey before we started, if we are going to be able to get this done. It could be done, and certainly it's something that can be done rather quickly. But we would not require it for starting the dredge. But we probably would want to discuss that and see if it's something to do. It wouldn't help your question, your problem, be able to have depth increments every X feet.
you gotta go to the mic.
If you have.
You have to use the mic.
Now. That might get it. Based on the survey data, what do you think it shows?
Well,
What
we showed, it changes. I mean, you're looking at the length of the channel, width of the channel, but what we have is that pre-dredge plan, which is, a document that we make available and everybody could use it. It doesn't, it's not something that's an electronic format that's sitting in your truck plotter, but it certainly could be a reference point because it does have those depths at half time. And what we said from our experience with the last year was that there really wasn't that much of a change from 2 to 3 month period that occurred.
That was geared towards a specific test.
Right.
We did wanted to run. That was to do a second survey, which now manager will reference his speech. We had 2 back-to-back nor'easters last year. If anybody remembers those 2. And we were very suspect that lots of sand perhaps washed into the channel. We wanted to know what it was looking like before. When we get out notification, the worst case, or before the bridge is gone from the air. Come to find out, with those 2 hellacious storms, we had no deposit of sand in the channel. The channel, about halfway up, coming into towards Popponesset Bay, we have a swirl current that may or may not be caused by the jetty. State jetty, not the one over the utility. And there's actually, the literal drift is from west to east, washing sand from the corner down a Waiting Place Road evenly down the spit, building all of it at the same time. So that's why we've always put sand in the corner for that.
Okay. You had a question, Mr. Haney? Mike?
I'll speak about it.
Well, they can't hear you on the.
I've been in town for years, and doing an excellent job trying to take care of all of these problems. My way of handling this is put a betterment on all of the docks that are on the water. Why? Then what are you getting for it? It increases the value of your property by getting deeper channels. I'd love to bring my boat up from Florida. I can't. I'm drawing too much water. So what I'm trying to say is, if you have deeper water, your property is worth a lot more money.
But we don't have deep enough water now. And we had it a year ago or 2 years ago.
But you gotta have this continuing problem for years. I've been here 40 years. I've been dealing with this over 35 years. Yes, Ken, we'll tell you, for a solution. And what they do in Florida, just so you know, they put islands out there. And I looked at approaching that. But the state doesn't look at that as favorable, because the so-called spoils. The guy you want to speak to is Tim over here. He knows how to get things dredged.
Okay,
It's Tim is
I have some questions.
his marina over there. He's done a great job. He's got water, but he's got this problem.
Get-
Getting out there. And I would love to have all my properties on deeper water.
well, there is a shirt that says longer, wider, deeper. I bought one at Chili Fest. I'm just not gonna wear it to the select board. Okay, can you come up to the mic, please?
I think to build on your point, I've been here for 40 years as well, and I think to the turnout
Look at
tonight,
them.
to the turnout tonight, I think it points to the evolution of Mashpee, the need for a long-term plan to be executed. If I just heard a $200,000 budget, that's not going to get it done. So the way Mashpee's evolved, 40 years ago, we came here for the beach, golf, maybe tennis, the raw bar, but it has become a massive boating community. Look at Mashpee Neck and the success of Mashpee Neck. How many boats are registered in Mashpee today versus just 5 years ago? I'm sure the excise taxes that are being collected in Mashpee on boating is a lot bigger than just 5 years ago, forget 20. So the point is, the homes on the waterfront, the taxes that are being paid, what many of the homeowners use in Mashpee are not the schools. They're using the waterways. This town wonderfully has evolved into a massive boating community. And I just don't think the budget has accompanied that. That really sounds amazing. And the work that SPB is doing should be overshadowed by what the town is doing. But SPB is doing a wonderful job, thankfully.
I appreciate the comments, but I just want to remind everybody here that we still have to pay for public education. We have to pay for public safety. And what we also have to pay for is to make sure we have clean water. And right now we've entered the sewering stages, and that's very expensive. But I understand that it's a priority to the folks in this room. I hear the message loud and clear, but again, there's a lot of other priorities that are front and center that are crying for more and more. So at any rate, I won't get into that discussion tonight, but anybody that has a question that has not had an opportunity to ask other than those online.
Big time lover of everything that is Mashpee. And I wanted to say just two things and lead to a question, Rodney, for you. The first is a big thank you to everybody that's here. It's just an amazing turnout. And to the 90 people that are on Zoom, you are rocking my world tonight. So thank you for the tech. I also want to say thank you to all of you that have come. Taking time out, you are busy, crazy busy people with, I don't know how many line items, Rodney, but the last my company was over 5,000, and they're all asking for peace as they should. What can we all do as lovers of Mashpee? But the knowledge and the history from St. Poppy Bay is just extraordinary. They know what's in, they know what's out. They're willing to do so much, and they're all volunteers. What are we not doing that we should do better? Either lobbying, going to the State House, getting Billy Keating in here and locking him in until we get something from the Army Corps of Engineers. Is there something you could tell us that we can then take back to all of our neighbors and say, we've got to do our part as well?
And I think that's going to be part of the long-term strategic plan, because if we're going to stay with the county, we need certain assurances. If we're going to go elsewhere, it's going to cost more money, and we will need those funding resources. So that's when we would really rely on you folks as well as others to basically lobby people at the state level or the federal level. And I know that there's a lot of connected people that I've been emailing. Do you want me to call the governor? Do you want me to call this person or that person? Not yet, but it's nice to have in the back pocket. But next, anybody else before we go online?
On the agenda, but what are we doing about doing all the other days? Coming off the Popponesset, that's one concern. Dredging. And I know maybe it's not appropriate. The point is, Ken will tell you, I've been here all these years, I've been working on this, giving a lot of different ideas and solutions. And he's done a tremendous amount of it. It's always been stopped at the state.
Yeah, I think in terms of Wacoit or any others, hold that thought for right now. Let's just wrap this up and then we may have a sidebar. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, just in case you're not able to do anything for this year or even until you're able to, should we consider signing that area? So for any of the non-visual voters?
That's already been addressed. I placed shoaling markers out there last weekend. I think I did last weekend. There's shoaling markers in between where the shoaling is the worst, in my opinion. It's not a geological survey. It's not a depth sounding. It's just where I think the water is the shallowest. I do caution all the boaters though in Mashpee, and I put it in that letter. Use caution throughout that entire approach channel. That's what I'm saying right now. I'm not going to tie myself down to a certain depth reading. I'm not going to tie DNR or the town down to a certain depth reading because I don't have the equipment to go out there and accurately mark how deep that channel is. In regards to the no wake zone, correct. Yeah, but I'm not moving any no wake markers around now. No, those showing markers should suffice for that.
Okay, and then
Well, you had a chart up there that had the preliminary sound, February sound. Can you put that back up and blow it up a little bit, just so people in here can see? And no one wants to take a comment on it, but you have some information you can share.
okay, while we're gathering that,
Because, earlier, it's a great document. It's not it's an nautical chart basically without a lot of the other features. So it is something that we can make available. Certainly print it out and use it.
Could that be enlarged? So you see the middle section?
I don't know if in the PowerPoint is meant in, but if you want, I can make it public.
Oh, I think we'll just go to the.
I can get it over. It was, it's for the benefit of the people in
You
here.
can't.
I agree completely.
You can't make it bigger. We can
We'll make
definitely
it
set it up.
available. We'll make it available. By the way, there is a sheet that's going around that should have everybody's email address. If you haven't signed it, please do, and we'll get some information out to you.
Last comment I have is that the dredging is important, obviously, for navigation. But we are noted, Popponesset Bay having the worst water pollution of all of Cape Cod. And how much will the dredging make a difference from what's the town doing from that standpoint? Because when we go to collect money from people, oh, I don't have to vote, I don't care about that. What you will care when you look at the nitrogen plumes and problems on Popponesset Bay.
Yes.
So I can attempt to answer that question. That channel must be maintained to maintain the current water quality within our bay. So any filling and exchange of the tide will worsen the inside of the bay. So it is proven. We need to keep this channel dredged and maintained to maintain current water quality. So it's not going to improve water quality, but to maintain the current status of our water quality, this channel needs to be maintained. And there was a study done by the School of Marine Science at UMass Dartmouth that stated that.
This season, any kind of correlation between the channel not being dredged and not being filtered properly?
No, so the excess algal growth that we're seeing this year is entirely due to excess nutrient loading. It has nothing to do with the channel. Not a flushing issue.
Okay, take one more and then we're gonna go online.
If another member of the 40 plus years. That's 35, opposed to talking about the wind speeds last week. There are very few of us 12 months a year. Mike and I measured 18 days where the winds at our house, at our dock, in the creek were over 75 miles an hour. Never mentioned by a weather forecast, never mentioned by a television station, never mentioned in the newspaper. I also have a question that relates to, say, Popponesset Bay's cost. And these storms require them, gentlemen said it was, that there's an emergency need for $300,000 of sand. Purchased outsized sand. In the bay, we have watched the spit go into the bay and create what my children call the sandbar. It is a huge area of sand. And I have always wondered, I happen to be an engineer, that's probably what I wonder thing. Why that could not be mined and then trucked away to belong to, say, Popponesset Bay when they need it. And if that could be worked into anything that anybody does for the dredge program, the number of years that we will continue to be able to kind of money $300,000 means the people who fund, say, Popponesset Bay is extraordinarily finite.
Yeah, so I can attempt to answer your question, but we are doing the ongoing planning for our harbor management plan. So we are taking input to put into the record as possible ideas for remediation of this excess funding that you're discussing now. And in relation to Chapter 91 and betterment, that is another area that we could definitely be taking into consideration within this harbor management planning effort. But we ask for the participation in these events that we're holding at the country club, is to come to those events. That's a great idea, putting a betterment on our docks and piers. It could be tied to Chapter 91 licensing because we're working with the state and CZM. It's definitely an avenue that we could pursue and ask the state. We're looking at additional funding, transient moorings, potential dredging of Aquay Bay, if possible. We are looking at a number of things in town and what we can do to improve our waterways and come up with some type of an economic benefit to our dredging plans and other needs in our waterways.
We can have the outer channels, the inner channels, all that can be one thing. This gentleman's concern and a a damn thing for the fact that I have no water behind my permitted dock at being low tide several months of the year. And if you're gonna tell me that someone's gonna fund everybody who has a dock and make that area deeper, it's never going to happen.
You are correct. That is not going to happen.
Because I make a living permitting things around the world. We understand that this is all hard, but that is never going to happen.
Agreed.
Because we're the rich folks who have docks. And when I came to Mashpee 42 years ago, I went to the town, and whoever was the town manager then, he said something that enlightened me. He said, "You have a boat, not a boat."
Well, I can't speak on that.
Well, just for the record, I have a boat and a boat.
Yeah.
Also, we have an area simply similar problem. They simply took a 10-foot stick, marked in 1-foot increments, and they handheld GPS on their radio, and did an informal survey of the depth of the water at different tides, and it's pretty damn accurate. And I think there's probably a whole pile of folks would be happy to be part of providing that data if you had some organized program.
Okay, we're gonna now go to the online questions. By the way, I just want to remind anybody that has not had an opportunity to ask a question or get an adequate answer, you can email the harbor master. His email address is right there on our website, and we'll try to get to them. And I'm there as well.
Great. So these are the two questions. This is from Mike Mashpee, I believe. I think he's referring to the county, but if they want us to stay with them, they should be incentives and disincentives, in my opinion. The disincentives could fund an alternative backup plan. By disincentives, I mean penalties. So I don't know if that's a statement or a question for the county.
Or the state.
Yeah.
Right, next.
And I won't be reading the statements that are ongoing. Can we please elaborate on what a backup plan would look like?
The backup plan, I think, has been articulated in terms of finances. It would be very costly in terms of timing. The earliest it could go into effect would be July 1st of 2024. That would be the earliest. And that's assuming that it was processed and approved. I get the first crack at the review. Well, actually, it's the department heads that submit it. Then it would have to come to my level, and then to the select board, and then to the finance committee, and ultimately to town meeting. Town meeting is the legislative body, and they're going to decide yes or no. And there's usually, at a typical town meeting, I know we've had some big crowds recently, but there's generally less than 300 people.
Donna, so for this year, as of now, the plan is to try to get the dredge here by June 26th and hopefully be done in 10 days.
We're working on getting the dredge here for June. I'm not going to promise anybody that dredge is going to be here in June. There's still a lot of people that need to approve this before it can just be done. I'm working on it. We're all working on it. Ken Cirillo and I talk every day, Ken? Do I bother you enough? Okay. We're working on getting this done for everybody. Just please keep that in your head. I can't promise you it's going to get done, because if I promise it's going to get done and it doesn't, we're going to be back here again in a month. I don't really want you guys to have to see my face again in a month if you don't have to. So we're working it as best as we can.
This is just another question that I can answer, but will the June 13th be available via Zoom? Yes, it will be. We will have a Zoom available, but we are asking for more statements or opinions in different focus areas. So there will be a survey that goes out to all of residents. It's currently underway, so you can take the survey and add your additional opinions of what we should include in our municipal harbor management plan. This is just another confirmation.
Just real quick. I'm not gonna hold the county down to June 25th or June 26th. In that general time frame, when we can possibly have this done. There's no set date that Ken Cirillo can be here with the draft. It just doesn't work that way. Because as you all saw, things come up. So please do not think that June 26th is the end all be all day for the dredge to be here. Please don't put that in your calendar saying county dredge will be here. That doesn't work that way. Please just understand that. That's the best way to, that general, anywhere around that time frame is what we're shooting for to get the dredge here. Ken can speak on the scope of the work.
The dredge with the booster, it gets a little slower because of the distance of pipe, but the sand shipping, which is larger of the dredges, so can roughly do 750 cubic yards a day. So, get a little bit longer than right now with the data, so that's sort of the lower end of the 4,500 yard mark. Yeah, what we do is, we will have the so right now we're doing Allen Harbor, there's a lot of traffic there. Everybody's going in and out, so we do a very good job there. At nighttime, we have a light on, but we need to be careful because certainly as we see at nighttime.
Tag teaming. It's all right.
Okay, so the next question is, how will we be communicating the updates in the short term for solutions to residents? And we will mostly be sending stuff out via Boring Info, which is the platform that the harbor master uses for reverse emailing. And there'll also be updates on the town website that will be available. If not possible, another solution would be to add clean waters, which this is difficult for me, I'm sorry. Which of these ideas are possible to pursue? I'm not understanding your question. It's very, very long. Okay, how do we increase the town budget for this purpose? I've answered that question. Yes. Again, yeah, please come to the June 13th meeting held at the New Seabury Country Club from 4 to 6. These are questions you can ask at that meeting. Our harbor master will be present at the meeting. And hopefully we get the town manager there.
Okay, I think that's gonna wrap it up unless there's a last minute question here, but I think in summary, I just wanna, I'm sorry, go ahead.
All right, before we close up, I did want to add something from say Popponesset Bay's perspective. At the end of the day, as I mentioned, Safe Popponesset Bay is not responsible for the annual dredging. We do everything we can to be to support it. What we have done is taken the lead, trying to develop a long-term strategy for the state, for the channels. We don't discussions on budgets.
I have a question.
Safe Popponesset Bay is taking the lead in
I have a question.
using those funds and raising the money to execute that longer, wider, deeper program. We're looking at approximately a $2 million cost, we think, to execute that program. Hopefully, it's going to be a function of which dredging entity we work with and what we pay per yard. But right now, we're budgeting approximately $2 million. We've raised a portion of that. We desperately need everybody in this room and this call to support what we're doing. Some of the conversation today have shown everybody what Safe Popponesset Bay is doing. We're certainly working incredibly closely with us, with the town. We're doing everything we can, but we're assuming that we're executing this program, and it's going to cost roughly $2 million. So any and all support is desperately needed. Appreciate it.
John, if they go out on the website, they can buy t-shirts. It said that on the video as well at the same time, so the t-shirt could cost you $10.
Okay, do
Oh,
you have a question?
happy to take one.
I want to thank everybody for attending. I know it has been a few minutes here since we first sat down, and I know some of your questions may have been answered, some of them may not have been answered satisfactorily. Maybe you're walking away with a little bit of frustration, or maybe a little less, hopefully a little less. But at any rate, I just want you to know that from the town's perspective, we will continue to work with the county, and we will continue to find out where we stand in terms of any short-term plan to resolve the current situation and any long-term plan as it relates to December, January, or February. We will try to keep you informed. We'll probably have to have another one of these at some point. But do appreciate everybody attending. I appreciate everybody here at the table taking their evening to be here to address you folks. And all I can say is hang in there, safe boating, and just give us a little bit more patience, and hopefully we have some answers for you that are going to be making you happy. Thank you.
Just real quick for everybody, for a question, please call my office, very reachable, shoot me an email. Please don't just assume that things work the way that you think they work. I will answer your question as best as I can. If I don't have the answer to your question, I will find an answer. Please call my office or send me an email. My email's on the webpage, very reachable. I'll get back to you. Thank you again. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you all.